The great school reform debate in our country today, which I'll just bring you up to date since you haven't been around for decades, but the great school reform debate today is framed as a competition, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, conservatives or liberals, it's framed as a competition between the United States and China and India. And so, the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, tries to rally the troops. I heard him on the Sunday talk shows last week, rallying the troops to beat the Chinese. And that's something that you don't think is valuable. It sounds like you're saying that's not a good motivation for a 6-year-old to get enlisted in the war to beat the Chinese.
You got that right.
But then it brings to mind a question, John, which is, how can we have a progressive project in the schools if we don't have a progressive project in our politics or our economy?
I think maybe we have to reinvent the public in some way, what it means to be public, to develop coteries of people at the grassroots level who do engage in these kinds of questions and show what they can do. This competition is based so much on testing too, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, somehow the public has been sold on the idea. The superficial public, that is, has been sold on the idea that test scores mean something. Yeah, I experienced that with the advent of IQ tests at the beginning of the 20th century, and I actually told a joke. Is it okay if I share a joke?
Sure, please.
Yes. I told this joke in many places, but it's a serious joke, mind you. I compared IQ testing to the way that they weigh hogs in, I said, Vermont. And the way they weigh hogs in Vermont is they catch a hog and they tie it on one end of a board, and they put the board on a fulcrum like a seesaw or teeter-totter, and then they run around the countryside bringing back rocks and put the rocks on the other end of the teeter-totter or the board until they find a rock that equally balances with the hog. And then they guess the weight of the rock. Now, we've heard of construct validity. And when we say something like intelligence, or we say something, if I said, give me a descriptor of something that means that an intelligent human being has, or what does it mean to be a high achiever? And I've done that with groups of people from many parts of the world, around the United States and so forth, and they all come up with beautiful, wonderful words like empathy or compassion and so on. And then I ask them, how many of those are indicated by the score on the IQ test or the achievement test or the so-called aptitude tests? And practically none. Of all the lists, they get 50 words up there, and none of them. And those words have come from the public. So why do they buy in to that kind of measure of national competition? What kind of propaganda? What's the curriculum of the propaganda that has made that the acceptance of that sort of thing?
Well, first of all, I think one of your contemporaries, Einstein, said a wonderful thing about this question of testing. He said, everything that counts can't be counted, and everything that can be counted doesn't count. So, it's worth underlining that fact. But when you talk about the public, you did say I got a superficial read of the public. The fact is that you're referring really to kind of the people who have the megaphone. I don't think, actually, that people buy into these tests in quite the deep sense that you think. In fact, Zio mentioned that my kids have their kids at her school, and they're constantly frustrated by the fact that even in that wonderful public school, there's still a press towards testing, a press towards, more accountability in that kind of narrow sense. And they say, well, nobody we know wants this. The teachers don't, the parents don't. Why do we keep doing it? It's because the people in power have an agenda that's somewhat different. So I like your idea of, enclaves of the public. You wrote a book, you wrote a short book called The Public and Its Problems, and you talked there about the eclipse of the public. And I hate to tell you that since 1952, the eclipse of the public has accelerated. But talk a bit about what you meant about the eclipse of the public and how we could push back. What are the forces that make the public disappear? And how could we fight for and broaden a sense of the public square, working as educators, as citizens? How could we do that?
Well, I think we have to somehow sustain a belief in the potential of every human being, regardless of their race or their color, their sex, their birth, their family, their material or cultural wealth, and many other variables. I mean, I think that's absolutely essential. If we only say that, and we don't put it into our everyday actions and our everyday conversation, I think then we're acting insincerely on it, and so I think that the public is eclipsed every time we do not believe in the potential of all human